and wanted to give y'all all an opportunity to be able to say who you are. Appreciate y'all all for being on here. I know all of y'all personally. I've met Charles through Eric, but all of y'all have come across my path, and I come across y'all. So I wanted to bring y'all on here, and Eric suggested bringing some of y'all on here as well. So thank you for your time. We wanted to have a discussion about how we're getting through this pandemic, your thoughts about the way that it's impacting you, your feelings, and then just have a discussion, and also just share those kind of things with everybody else, and see what people want to ask y'all, and see if you're open to being able to answer those questions. Y'all cool?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna go from top to the bottom and introduce who you are. On my top screen, I have Eric.
What's going on, everybody? Eric Marsh here. I don't even know if I'm dropping titles or all of that. It's just, one of the reasons why we're here is, as a concerned Black man during this time, we feel like it's important to get a variety of perspectives and share our experiences during this COVID crisis. So I'm just glad to be here.
Phil?
Oh, we on me already. Dang, I'm trying. I ain't even getting my joint together. So peace, y'all. I'm Phil Roundtree. So I am a mental health advocate here in the city, formerly a therapist. I am the founder of QuadefyLLC, which offers wellness services any way you can think of wellness. When we talk about mental health therapy, mental health coaching, now we talk about being a public speaker, talking on the issues of Black mental health and Black men's mental health. I am also the host of the live daily digital show, Rhetorically Speaking, which comes on 8 to 9:30 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And when you ask what Rhetorically Speaking is about, we talk about everything, right? We talk about everything. It's from a wellness perspective. So yeah, tune in tonight, QuadefyLLC.
Cool. We got Greg.
Not on mute. Pure, perfect. What's up? Yeah. This is Greg Corbin. I'm a poet, storyteller, artist. Currently, serve as the director of the Restorative Justice Reentry Programming for Mural Arts. A lot of our work deals with its returning citizens and helping people get ready for jobs. Working on a few creative ideas, and also working on a book, probably for like the last 2 years. So many different changes that have happened in my life that have put me in where I'm at now. So I'm here to be present and participate in evolving our humanity.
Appreciate you, man. Charles?
Hey, I'm Charles White. I think I actually might be the only person in the group that's not from Philly. I'm actually from Memphis, Tennessee.
Welcome.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be in the midst of these brothers here. Eric and I, we had some conversation earlier about, the mental health, and it was something that I reached out to him about because it's a cause that's near to me. And so it was just kind of kismet that other conversations along these lines are being had simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to be here to share. I'm a writer, a poet, essayist, or what have you. I'm a salesman. I'll sell you whatever I got next to me if I need to. And most of all, I'm a lifelong learner. So I'm looking forward to learning and sharing with the brothers.
Appreciate you and welcome to Philly. Are you living in Philly now? Or are you from
Memphis?
Memphis?
No, I'm in Memphis right now. I'm in Memphis.
Still there. Okay.
I've been to Philly. I like it. I look forward to getting back there sometime in the not too distant future, once everything gets a little settled.
Yeah. And we got my brother James.
Yeah, I'm James A. I'm in the violence prevention field. So majority of my work is around some of the teens in the city that's been shot, stabbed, or taken to the ED from concussions, and just providing that whole, what that world looks like after that, helping them heal. I'm also the co-founder of which is Youth Empowerment for Advancement Hangout, which is a teen-led nonprofit that focuses on like those underserved youth who aren't engaged in sports or no structured program, but they're the ones who typically just hang out and do nothing. Just getting them engaged and try to empower them and get them to know their true value, and kind of just work on a whole lot of the same stuff that I do with the violence prevention program, that whole addressing everything from that social determinants perspective, from a youth lens though.
Thank you, man. I don't even know if I introduced who I am. My name is Ihsan Hines, and I'm the founder of an organization known as My Brother's Keepers Cares, also known as MBKCares, suicide prevention, mental health awareness, and I'm a father and also a spoken word artist from Philadelphia. So I want to get right into some questions, and thank y'all all for being here again. Just the fact that we're here right now is saying something. It's good to be able to see all brothers talking. I've been out to Phil's event. Phil, is it called You Good Bro or What's Good Bro?
Yeah, hashtag You Good Man. So
Okay.
it is a bi-weekly men's group for anybody that identify as male, where we have a healthy conversation about the idea of wellness. So we're talking about mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual wellness. So hopefully once, we get back to some type of normalcy here, we can start having that again.
Yeah. So I went out to one of your events probably just a few weeks before all this stuff broke. And I remember the discussion was around the aftermath of Kobe Bryant's death.
Yeah.
And I remember how that was a difficult time. Like this year, I want to shift this first question towards you, because this year seems like it's been one tragedy after another. We went from starting the year off with I believe the wildfires in Australia was like a big thing. I don't know if that was the tail end of last year or the beginning of this year, but then we went from that to the Kobe Bryant death, and that impacted a lot of people emotionally and mentally already. And then we went right into the very next, it seemed like a month and a little bit over a month later, everything was going bad with Corona. So I want to know, like, how have you been dealing with this pandemic personally?
Personally, I mean, I will say I have my days. I have my moments where I'm antsy, I'm feeling claustrophobic, where I just want to leave the house, which I still do to go running or what have you. But a lot of my time is spent in the home. It's a little different for me, I guess, because I'm a full-time entrepreneur, so I was already spending a lot of time in the home. But I think it's a difference when I'm forced to be here due to potential physical wellness issues. And so, me being somebody who lives with anxiety and depression, there are moments and times that we've been during this quarantine period where it's been exacerbated, right? But that's when I try to use the coping skills that I've acquired over time. It's not fun. It's not, but it's necessary. And so I look at all of this, even when we talk, I guess my thinking is a little bit different than some folk, right? I look at all of this just being a part of the game, right? And when I say a part of the game, it's just a part of life. And maybe that's just how I deal and how I cope with life. So when we talk about the Australian fires, we talk about Kobe Bryant death, I just look at this as just being a part of what happens when you're alive and what happens when you're living. Things happen, right? And it's all about how we respond, how we cope with it. It's not to say that I don't have empathy, but I think that that perspective has served me well during this time, and just recognizing that this is not going to last forever, right? And that this is just what we have to do in order to get to a place of where we desire to be. So for me personally, again, I'm just dealing with it and just trying to continue my day as usual, the best that I can.
Yeah. See, I think that even off of what you just said, it's been important that you already were doing the work before the tragedy happened. You know what I mean? Before this recent adversity happened, you were already doing the work. And I know that was something that that I can hold true to, and even Eric or any of y'all that are on here. But I know Greg, I remember reading some of your posts like over the last couple of years about like a transformation that was happening within your own life. And I just want to know, like, how has the things that you already been through been helping you right now with this recent tragedy? Do you feel like you were better equipped because of things that already happened for you?
Yeah. One thing I noticed is that I was telling Eric this earlier. I said, a lot of, and Charles was on this call too. A lot of things jumped off for Black men when the Me Too movement really, really started, right?
Right.
Before that, it was a lot of Black men being killed by, law, police. So the pain was already being amplified. And so what I noticed is there were a lot of these call-ins and these come together moments. A lot of men's circles were popping up to talk about it because they had nowhere they can go with the conversation, because it would get problematic because people would say stuff online, and then here comes a swarm of people, to police their language, and then it becomes uncomfortable. And so what I noticed is that for a lot of men in general, there weren't places where ignorance was allowed, where it could be celebrated for the I want to say celebrated in a way where it can be moved as a learning opportunity, right? Because we all don't know everything. And I think there was a time for me where I realized how much that I internalized that was unhealthy for me. Things that I received from previous generations and the way I was raised, I internalized those things, and then I externalized those things moving forward in my life. And I was able to catch certain things, and certain things for me had to happen that were tough lessons. And I think they were very necessary. And so it kind of led me in this way where I started going to therapy consistently. So for the last 2 years, I've been in therapy consistently, sometimes twice a week, depending on how I'm feeling, because I have so much to say. And I realized as a poet, sometimes we can get an applause, we can get narcissistic with our pain and our trauma, but we can tell stories that are actually too close to our trauma and to our art. And we don't really get through the healing aspect. And some things are really just a continuous process. So the things you saw me posting online were really about me trying to show it was a process.
Yep.
It wasn't an overnight success. And I think often we want people to get it right in 2 or 3 days or 2 and 3 weeks. And the reality is it may take months, it may take years. And that happens in both ways. And so it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of grace. It takes opportunities for redemption. It takes people's forgiveness. It takes forgiveness of self. And the one thing I learned mostly is all the things we want from people, we have to be willing to give to ourselves, because we are just reflections of everybody around us. And if we can't give it to ourselves, we get to practice on other people in ways that may not be the most healthiest. So we have to continue to work on ourselves and sit still with ourselves. So when this moment came, I was already in a space where I was celebrating my quiet, my silence, my stillness, and really being vocal about it. And now we're in a moment where it's like we're all on timeout, and we all are in a position where we kind of can't run from ourselves anymore. And that's a tough place to be, because now is the opportunity for people to have crucial conversations with themselves. You can't blame the government now. You can't blame capitalism. You can't do any of that. You're responsible for some of this as well. Yes, race, class, education, all those things are real conversations, real dialogue. But until you start owning your part in the dynamic, you can't restore anything with you in the world in between you. So how do you create the healthy ecosystem inside yourself, inside your heart, and really say, yo, how can I be a better human being, period?
Yeah, that was a great answer, man. And it's the truth. I recognize that in my own life, man, like the healing process and being a poet and a public figure. Sometimes I got caught up, and I think even last year I got caught up in trying to offer people a healing that I hadn't even fully processed myself. And I found myself overwhelmed. There was, I'm gonna mention 2 things that happened that significantly impacted me and became a topic of discussion at our meetings. In September the 9th was the beginning of Suicide Prevention Week. And there were 2 people who were influential in the mental health field, and they both took their lives the same day. The guy who was the director of psychology and mental health at University of Penn jumped off a building downtown. And then later that afternoon, a pastor of a mega church in California killed himself. And that was really impactful, because these are people who were helping other people, but they were dealing with their own internal demons. And I realized, like, I'm actually still doing that myself, but to a less degree, because I've done the things that you're talking about. Consistently been in therapy now for about 1.5 years, and being honest about things when I've been on death's door, when I felt like leaving here, and talking about people and allowing them to be able to talk me out of things and being able to speak life to me. But I wanted to thank you for that, man, because that's bigger than Corona. Because we're gonna overcome this, but somebody's gonna always have tragedy and trauma coming, like Phil was saying. So I want to ask James this question. Actually, like, what's been the most difficult thing right now for you with this pandemic, or like trying to navigate life while it's going on?
So for me, I think I'm one of those people who like I don't like to sit still, but it's not avoidance. I don't like to I like to make sure like my life is being impactful, whether it's for my family or my community. And I feel like right now the difficult piece is personally just trying to humble myself and sit still. And even when I'm sitting still physically, like mentally, I'm still, I'm not watching the news or anything like that. But I'm still like racing, like something needs to be done, something needs to be planned. If I got all my ducks in order, like what do I need to do to help other people get their ducks in order? So for me, it's been that type of like struggle. And I'm not really. I see that the pandemic, the impact it is, but I also know that this is the type of shit that was happening already. Like we already was like limited with resources for our communities. We already were a paycheck away from being one of those 6.6 million people filing for unemployment. We already wasn't getting the level of healthcare we needed. So so this pandemic or not, this was the pace we were already going. So I think the difficult part for me is like sitting back, like now really seeing all this stuff fully unfolding in my community, and not being able to be as impactful as I would like to be. And again, like personally, I feel like I'm in a position where I'm okay. My family is okay.
Yeah.
And for me, that just eat me up, just knowing that I'm okay, I'm all right, and then the next person isn't, and how this is like really impacting them, and that this like that they like most communities aren't. Well, our community isn't like prepared for something like this, even if it's like 2 weeks. If it was 2-week quarantine, they're not prepared for that. We teach them to get up and do something. We don't teach nobody to get up and to relax and just focus on yourself. So that's just probably where like my struggle has been at, just having to sit down and process the reality of all of this.
Yeah. And Charles, like what kind of emotions and feelings have come up for you?
Man, like all of them, all of them. It's been kind of rough, myself. I know my situation is maybe a little bit unique, but even in saying that, I know that it's not unique at all, because we got millions of people here, and rest assured, there's always at least one of them that's going through the same shit you're going through. In my case, I actually was off work on medical leave when the whole thing hit, and so I was actually planning to make my return to work the same week the mayor announced the stay-at-home order. And so emotionally, I go back and forth between frustration, between anger, confusion. There's happiness. I get to be with the children all day, but that gets frustrating after a while. So it's a lot. It's a lot, and sometimes it gets really tough to process. And that's one of the things that I've been working on myself. Lately, one of the biggest things I've been feeling is just a frustration, because when you look like with the social medias and everything, and of course, this is like the number one topic of conversation, and everybody's got all these disparate positions about it. And it's frustrating because you see people that people that you love, and they're so far off base sometimes. And you want to be upset, but at the same time, you understand, it's like some of my people wrong as hell on their positions on what it is, what it ain't, what to do, what not to do. But I have to look at it from a position of understanding. I understand that this is something that most of us, I dare say everybody I know personally, just could never have fathomed, Right. And frankly, we haven't had a whole lot of sensible guidance on it. So we're a bunch of people who don't know, who are looking to other people who don't know.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, is my number one thing. The number one thing that I've had to deal with is just the confusion and frustration of it all. And so I've been trying to utilize some of those coping skills, and everything. But yeah, to answer the question, that's the biggest thing. It's just frustration.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that right there, like that's actually gonna lead me to this next question I'm gonna ask you, Eric, because like the guidance and all of that, there was a point that you and I were talking about how people were handling this. Like it's important to get our exercise and all that stuff in, but there were like groups of people that I saw on social media having like a what it looked like a basketball tournament outside. Like, what are your thoughts about how we do have the compassion Charles is talking about as far as understanding where people are and how they're dealing with the pain, but still feel the need to properly tell people how this is? Like, what would you say to somebody right now who wants to get outside to get the exercise, but they need some wisdom or some advice? You have anything to offer?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to share about that is that I think, it's important that we maintain some semblance of normalcy in our day-to-day lives, but at the same time be safe, right? And so being outside is not the end of the world. But to your point, this issue that we saw with the basketball games that were happening where there were like 75, 100 people out on the court, or there's been numerous reports about, gatherings here in Philadelphia at Belmont Plateau, where people are getting together in large groups. I understand, and I think many of us understand the human need for connection. We understand, that something similar to what James was saying earlier about, we've been going through struggles. We've been facing a lot of these issues from the very beginning. So for a lot of people, this crisis is not really a new crisis. They've been living in crisis for a long time. And so they don't take, the rest of the world's cries about this COVID-19 crisis really to heart, because we've already been dealing with crisis. So why not another one, right? But the reality is this is very different. And so when you are gathering in groups of people, you're dealing with an unseen factor. That unseen factor is a virus, right? Nobody can see it. You're never going to know whether or not somebody is a carrier. Even if you were a carrier, you wouldn't know for any time from a week to 14 days before you started becoming symptomatic. And so the thing about it is, yes, you can go outside for a walk. I'm gonna tell you, I've been dealing with a lot over the past couple of weeks, to the point where just this past weekend was the first time I had been out of the house in over 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But when I went out, I made a point Monday morning to go out and go for a walk. And it was the best feeling in the world, right? And I would never want to deny anybody else that opportunity. But the reality is, practice social distancing, make sure you wear face coverings, right? Make sure you wear gloves of some kind, understand how to sanitize and wash your hands. There's certain things that you can do. That situation, with the basketball game, and, that was something that I think Greg could probably shed a little more light on than I can, just in terms of understanding that there's a whole culture of ball players who feel like, this is their livelihood, this is their life. When it comes to this idea of being compassionate about understanding that, something that I shared earlier on social media, where there was a person who was saying, "Oh, look at these idiots outside. Look at them. Look at how stupid they are." Right. But what I said was, you don't know what their home life is like. You don't know what conditions they are living in under that roof that you're asking them to be confined in 24/7. And so it's easy to call somebody foolish for being outside during the quarantine. But the reality is, we already know from news reports that domestic violence has been increasing, abuse of children has been increasing, all types of horrors and difficult situations have been occurring in homes because people don't know how to manage the situation in home. And as I think James might be able to allude to in working with youth, A lot of our youth don't want to be in a house because that place is unhealthy, but they can go outside and be with their friends and their peers and find that comfort and find that connection. And so I just want to make people, aware that there's no need to, ostracize or demonize the people that we see outside. Some of it is deliberate. Yes, some of it is a blatant disregard for the warnings, but a lot of it is out of lack of knowledge. Something that Charles shared earlier is that we are uninformed people looking for advice from uninformed people because people don't know. Nobody knows how this is really reacting and going to impact us. So I would just say, let's be mindful of that before we start judging others and make sure that we each carry a level of personal accountability and safety for what we're doing. And then when we see somebody that's doing something foolish, be mindful to speak to them from a position of love and concern and care, because they may not know that it's as serious as it is.
And before I ask Phil a question, Greg, did you want to chime in on what he was just saying?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on, one of the things that we have to realize too is that, it's the coronavirus, the way it does work is that a person can be asymptomatic, which means they do not show any symptoms or do not even know they have it, but can pass it to someone else. And so for a lot of young people, it probably won't do damage unless it mutates. And that only time will tell, right? So right now, a lot of people are writing it off as another version of the flu. And so for younger adults and younger children, it's easier for them to escape responsibility and say, I'm good. I'm invincible, right? I'm young. I'm invincible. I'm good. So I understand that. I understand that. I've been there, right? The other piece about basketball, like what I'm noticing is it's not just basketball. It's our music entertainment. It's people online as producers who are starting to do these battle things that, like, Timberland and Swiss Beats did something last week. It was legendary. I wish they could have did that before all this happened, right? So people are getting very creative, and what's happening with the basketball community is that energy has to go somewhere. It's a very competitive thing. But I think the other part is that we're not acknowledging is another point that Eric made is like having compassion from people, when they're trying to find an outlet and you don't know where people's homes are. And for basketball, I was playing every Sunday almost because it was an outlet. It was a great network of good people. And it was a way to have a release and have those good conversations about what challenges were happening. So for some people, basketball is a form of mental health and it's a form of wellness. It's just in this moment, it's a good idea to play, but it's horrible timing, right? Because it can extremely be unhealthy for the next person, even if somebody, one of those 100 people don't get sick. Another thing is the police were actually out there watching the play. Like, so, that was something that I saw in the background of the video, like, wow, but my biggest concern with these gatherings is an increase in police measures and extreme behavior. And that may become normalized over time because unfortunately, melanin is associated with abuse in this country. So,
yeah. And you got to be careful about taking that stuff home. So these young people with the attitude of it won't happen to me could take it home to grandma or take it home to mom.
Exactly.
The rest of the family at risk.
Yeah.
Hey, Phil, has anything been coming good out of this for you? Have you been able to find any creative energy or any outlets?
I'm not even, and I made this post, and then I saw a similar post, starting a trend. But honestly, the main thing for me, man, is just make it out, hopefully unscathed. My whole thing is I want to be able to say I survived, and that's what I'm holding myself to. Now, of course, I have goals. I have things that I want to accomplish in the midst of this, right? Because you're like, oh, I got all this time, and so, but I don't want to. I put a lot of pressure on myself anyway, like the good brother was saying, like James was saying, being here during this time, you have all of these hours in the home, and it's just this idea of I should be productive, I should be productive, I should be productive. Mm-hmm. And then it consumes you. And so we know as Black men, we're accustomed to one of those tenets of masculinity is that idea of overachieving. And then, when it's Black masculinity, it's, I got to be 3 times as good. And so all of my waking time needs to be to achieving some goals. And so for me, yeah, I've accomplished some things. Like I said, I got Rhetorically Speaking, my live daily digital show that, you know, came because I got fired from, I can't say fired. I got fired from Word. I said it anyway, from Word Radio. And it was just like one of those things where it was just like, you know what, here I am. I got the time. I believe in myself. And why not do it? Right. And so I guess I'm at that point now with any of my goals, whether it's this, whether it's writing or what have you. It's just like, yo, I got the time to do it. So why not do it? But I'm not putting that pressure on myself to I have to create, I have to have a business at the end of this, or, you know, I have to have my book finished at the end of this. Would that be nice? Yeah, that's cool. But ultimately, if I could just say I survived, that's the only thing that matters to me. And again, it's that perspective of everything that I've been through in my life, right? Like, you know, my brother dying when I was 17, him being 24 from the opioid epidemic, you know, way before it became trendy. You know, is dealing with depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideations and all of that. So it's like, nah, man, I just want to have a good day. You know what I mean? And so for me, I got to start at the, you know, at the it's not even a bare minimum, right? At a just basic level. I just want to have some good moments. I want to be able to be present. If I can say that, if I can say, listen, I'm being present more so than I was then, even if I don't have something tangible to show for it. So, yeah, man, I'm just out here I'm just trying to be in the moment. I'm trying to say yes to things that I might not necessarily say yes to, and just trying to be more in tune with myself. So, but at the basic level, if I could get out of this and say, yo, I made it out, I'm good with that.
Yeah. This year has been, I've experienced what you just now said, as far as like this feeling. Now I will say that this time has been a time for me to be more productive, but it was the things I was procrastinating with already that I now don't have an excuse about getting done. But I do identify that feeling of like, let me consume myself and work to make myself feel a certain way. But what I have been able to appreciate over the last couple of weeks is creative energy has come back for things that were on the back burner that should have been done 2-3 years ago, things that weren't hard to do. But also a feeling of, or a revelation and a reminder that no matter how this plays out, we're gonna die one day anyway. And I'm not saying that to be morbid, but we always are a moment away from life. Like none of us know when our lives are going to end, no matter what. So this kind of put things into perspective for myself, and I'm sure many others can relate to what really matters. Like what really matters, not in a way of being dismissive, but like taking time to like play Uno with my daughter. I never was playing Uno with my daughter, and this is something that really shouldn't be a thing. But I realized like now being in a place where you can't go outside, you now have to connect in the home. And I think that a lot of people have mortgages and rents for places they don't actually spend time in. So you're paying rent, you're paying mortgage, never actually being able to enjoy the home. And this has allowed people an actual opportunity to enjoy and clean up and all kinds of other things. I think that's a good thing that's come out of this. And the primary thing that came out of this is a desperation to cry out to God, like to get back to things that were spiritually nourishing for me, getting back to journaling, reading my Bible, praying, listening to music that was uplifting, like those kind of things. And that's not to force my opinion on anybody, but to just let you know those are the kind of things that were helping me out.
Hey, Ihsan, let me jump in there real quick. Because I feel like that this relates to the question that you asked me, right? We're circling back around to this idea of self-care, right? And for many of those Black men and boys that we saw the picture of out there on those basketball courts, that a lot of our own community is criticizing, you know, we don't know what self-care looks like for each individual, right? Because it's an individual process. And so for many of them, and I think Greg alluded to this earlier about, you know, spending time on the basketball court on Sunday was a type of self-care, right? And so because of the struggles that we as Black men have faced and Black people have faced so consistently and so regularly, you know, sometimes what we consider self-care looks reckless to other people, but it's an effort to separate ourselves from the anxiety or from the stress. Or it's an effort to validate our existence and our life. And so sometimes, yeah, it does look foolish. And that in that situation with so many other people around, yeah, it was a bit foolish, but that was all that many of them understood.
Yeah.
And that's what their outlet was. And so one of the things I had hoped that would come out of this conversation that we're doing now is alternatives, ways that we can share like practical tips on what other forms of self-care can we practice that takes into account the deadliness of this virus and this issue of social distancing, so that we can, get that energy out, so that we can stay healthy, stay physically active, but not jeopardize our loved ones and ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
So, bro, I'm sorry. Can I just speak to my bad, James? Because I don't want to go off topic real quick. No, and I just want to speak to that because somebody actually sent me that video, and it's something I'm gonna be talking about later on the show. And if one of y'all brothers want to join me on the show, trust me, feel free. Let me know. We could poly after this. Starts at 8. But me watching it, and I'm just like, well, first there's this idea of, oh, they shouldn't be out there. Yes, we recognize that. We recognize that congregating in large groups can make you especially susceptible to the coronavirus. I just came from running in Cheltenham, right? And it was families of 5 and 6 white folk. It was when I was running past old white people, and they was giving me thumbs up and waving. Right. So I don't want it to be this conversation like it's just us out here. And that's a lot of times that's what happens. And we're a lot of times we're the one to push that narrative by sharing videos like that. Right. Exactly. And so I just wanted to say that. And then we got to think about the age range of these children, these children and adolescents, and especially being Black boys, this idea of impulsivity, because their brains aren't fully developed. Right. So they're not able to think as critically as we would want them to be. Right. Mm-hmm. And this age appropriate behavior. And so I would look at a child, somebody who's 14 and he's not fighting to try to get outside to be with his friends. I would look at him like, wait, what's going on with him? Right. What socio-emotional issues might he be experiencing because he doesn't want to go outside and be with his friends? And so that's where the parents come in at, or the caregivers, and who's supposed to have the wisdom, who's supposed to have the knowledge to say, no, you stay home. Right. So I just wanted to put that out there. Like what we see there is age appropriate behavior. Yeah. Honestly. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. My bad, James.
That was a good point, Phil.
Yeah.
No. So what I was going to bring up was, I think, and again, as far as like tips, so a few weeks ago, along Cobbs Creek Parkway, it was the same situation. A bunch of kids outside playing basketball, maybe like 30 of them. And some of them I know. So I went up there and I just asked them, like, yo, why y'all out here? And for most of them, it just was just a normal sunny day. We playing ball. Then it was, oh, do you know about the pandemic and that we need to practice social distancing? And for them, it was a joke. It wasn't real. And it took for us to kind of explain, give them a little bit of psychoeducation about the impact of it and what it can do, what it can't do, some rumors, some myths. And they all stayed on the court, but at least I was comfortable knowing that I shared a little bit of game with them. The other thing is, when we talk about how we handle certain these things, we don't even know how we don't even know these kids' coping skills, if they even have any coping skills. So you can't take something away from them without replacing it. And you can't even get that far without having a conversation with them. So for us to say, all right, well, they out there, they some assholes, they gonna spread the virus. But then you have to look at everything. They education-wise, were they taught or anything related to what COVID is? They weren't given the game. They wasn't given the information about it. They taking what they get off social media, what they get from the news. They got it from Chinese people that's been around since 2001. They taking all these things and they know that it might be false. So they don't know what to believe in. And then we get into this piece of power and control. They go to school, power is taken from them. They go home, power is taken from them. Now they at the point where they can be out in the community and they have this sense of control because nobody else out there. Yeah. So for me, it's just being able to like talk to these young people and ask what do they need, like what is it that they want. They might not really want. Some of them were spectators. Some of them don't hoop. They might just be out there to smoke because they can't smoke in the house, so they go outside and smoke. So it's different things that's being replaced. And when you think about it, that group of kids, if you were to move them in the house, if the police officer say, "Hey, you guys got to go in the house," right? What would have happened then? Like, you took their coping skill away from them. Are they going to go in the house and continue to deal with their depression and anxiety and then do something else? Or are they going to shift and go to another part of the community where they're probably still thinking about some retaliation stuff that happened in a different part of the community? So you got to weigh all those options. But it all starts with being able to approach them and educate them and then ask them, what do they need? That's all it takes. Like, yo, what do you need? Let them tell you nothing, or they might tell you something, but just give them the opportunity to speak up for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just want to say this real quick because James brought up a good point, right? Like this idea of what COVID is. So, and this could be a question, to think about. Like, when did you first become aware of COVID, right? So I was on Word for the whole month of January, and I was aware of COVID. And I would come on and I would talk about it. It was in Wuhan, it was in China, and I'm like, listen. It's 1 billion people in China, and you telling me a couple thousand people got it? Nah, wake me when it gets here, right? We're not taking it serious. And so what's happening is with a lot of our youth and just some people in general, they're looking at it that same way. It needs to be at my front door. It needs to be in my house and my family member before it affects me, right? And that's how a lot of things are, whether we talking about coronavirus, whether we talking about gun violence, whether we're talking about eating healthy. What does it take? It might take somebody getting diabetes that you love. You see everybody, you might know people with diabetes, right? But until it hits your home or it might hit you directly, do you begin to care about it? So, and I think that's where we start to talk about that idea of extending grace, where they're still looking at it like, yeah, it's here in Philly, but Philly's China. In my small circle, we're America, and how we were viewing it back in January.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out too, there are two different conversations happening at the same time with this. One is the basketball game yesterday where, I just want to be honest about what was happening. They were dudes in their mid-20s, and they weren't young, right? I think that happens because the way we see information. I was online listening to two people talk earlier. They were civic officials, and I noticed that they didn't fully understand the way COVID fully worked from a scientific perspective. Now, a lot of people don't know I have a biology degree, so I know about viruses. I know how they work, and there are some loopholes. I won't say loopholes, but loose ends with this whole thing. But that's neither here nor there. We are dealing with what we're dealing with. But there is something to figure out how to simplify this in a way that's transmittable to anybody so that they understand the impact of it. And I think that's what we need to figure out. What is the shared language going to be that an 8-year-old can understand and an 80-year-old can understand, and they both get the same understanding and how to interact with this? Because the other thing was, I can agree, even though these guys were in their mid-20s, they weren't really kids. Right? I know the way we identify youth goes up to 25, 26 now, but I don't want to let people off the hook too much. But the reality here is I also know that people see it as entertainment sometimes, and they're not really sitting still long enough to receive how serious this thing really is and how many people it's knocking off and how it's increasing and the frequency of it. And so to James' point about coping mechanisms, right? Basketball is already a coping mechanism for a lot of people. Football, baseball, sports in our neighborhoods are already coping mechanisms. And then when you do shift into power dynamics, when we look around and we're trying to find power, we're like, how many people really own their house, right? We know gentrification more than we know COVID. We know gun violence more than we know COVID. So in our minds, sometimes we're like, that's such a disconnect. But it still comes back to shared language that everyone can understand and to continue to educate and inform. And the relationship piece is big because I don't think I had a relationship with any of those guys out there playing, even though I watched a lot of them come up and play. I don't think I'm the guy that's going to walk up and be like, yo, can y'all rethink what y'all doing. Like, this is not a good look, right? They probably like, oh, hey, what you talking about? Man, you don't get out of here. So I'm not the power broker in that dynamic, but somebody is. And so to identify those relationships and those organizers when it comes to those groups is the key. And respect that we all have that organizing power. We all have relationships with people. We can all bring people to the table. So recognizing that power as well.
Well, and so there you go, Greg. That's exactly why we are here, why we're doing this conversation, right? Because one of my biggest pieces is that, you know, I'm a huge fatherhood advocate, right? And that doesn't mean that I only focus on fathers, but I'm focused on men who are role models in a family unit, right? And so that for me, it comes back to those of us who are here having this conversation, those of us who are here who know more details, more specifics, more information, and can articulate that to those others who maybe do respect the power dynamic that we bring, or maybe do respect the words that we bring. I want to have this collective conversation. And the reason why it's being streamed is so that other people will be able to hear this intimate conversation and be able to take some tidbits back to those 20-something-year-old young men who maybe don't have somebody who's in their ear about, you know, the way that they could be playing with a basketball and a virus could be on that basketball and everybody's touching it, right? Mm-hmm. Or the fact that you're standing there, or you might be sharing a blunt or a cigarette or something, right? Somebody shared with me that there was a group of people outside a hookah bar. I'm like, how is that even happening, right? Mm-hmm. So just as individuals, those of us who do have some level of information, I think Charles mentioned this earlier, those of us that have some level of emotional intelligence and perspective on this that can actually share this information, that's why we are here sharing this and talking to one another, and why it's being streamed. So I just wanted to share that, and also recognize the fact that, you know, there are some folks who are on Facebook who are asking a couple of questions. I'm not sure if there's anybody on your pages. So guys, if you see people asking questions on your page as you're streaming it, feel free to share the question or let us know that somebody's asking a question. One person, Kyrie McKinney asked, what are our thoughts on social media and its effects, both negative and positive, on our current culture? Like you just shared, a lot of this conversation, not only around the basketball game, but even from my understanding, how the basketball game started was on Instagram. And so what are some of your thoughts? I'm gonna go with Charles first. Charles, what are some of your thoughts about the impact that social media has had on not just the coronavirus, but on, this is a conversation about Black men and our well-being. Right. How do you feel like social media has impacted that, both good or bad?
Well, you know, the reality is, you know, for better or worse, it's here, you know, the social media, and it cuts both ways. It's not, in keeping in line with our discussion about Black men, one of the issues that, you know, that we tend to have is that we find it difficult sometimes to feel comfortable expressing what we feel. And when you put it on that stage on the social media, I kind of wrestle with that because it cuts both ways. There is a certain degree of anonymity there that, you know, can help to ease that inhibition.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's this great big stage, you know. We've got hundreds, thousands, potentially millions of people that are going to see and hear what I have to say. And so now that just adds more of this need to be right, or to at least look or sound right, or feel like I know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and so information moves so quickly that one person posts one meme that's completely, absolutely, irrefutably dead ass wrong. And 30 minutes later, you know, it's moved across a million mobile devices now. And so it makes it so much easier to proliferate information, good, bad. And, you know, for us, it really, it comes down to how we can process it. And we can, I found personally that I have to sometimes just shut it down. I've heard people talk about, you know, unplugging for a long time. I never had any issues with that. You know, I'm good. But being somewhat confined now, you know, there's not much else to do. You know, okay, well, I've read a book, played a video game, I've yelled at the children. I guess I'll see what's going on Facebook now, you know? And so you just have to kind of find a way to separate from it, because there's no way you can get the good out of it without having to also taste the bad, you know? You just can't separate the two. You can't say, okay, I'm gonna click on Facebook today, but I'm only gonna see the good stuff. You know, you can't. And so I just have to sometimes unplug, and this kind of circles back to what we were talking about earlier with the coping skills. You know, I have to unplug, I have to go in the kitchen and cook, you know. That's one of the things that I've learned to do and you know, I know if I go in the kitchen, I'm gonna kill an hour or two. Because that social media thing, you know, you have to take it in moderation, otherwise it will eat you alive.
Or it can. I wanted to actually let Phil touch on this too, because I know from being at the discussion he had going on, like there's one thing with this platform, I want to make sure that all of us are speaking our truth, but these are not necessarily absolutes for everyone, because I know, like, in speaking with Phil, I remember how when he was talking about like how he uses social media, sometimes people are like combative towards something he might post, but it's always a thought-provoking thing. And I think that that's beneficial, right? You know what I mean? Like, even though it might rub somebody wrong,
I
it
like
makes
beef.
somebody,
That's you can say. I like Facebook beef.
yeah, but I learned from it, because even the way you and I initially met was through a disagreement of a point of view about something through
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah.
But it left room to get to know each other in a personal environment, and we realized we're more alike than we're not alike, right?
Yeah.
But I realized, like, even like, not saying you're a protagonist, but I'm saying it takes a difference of opinion sometimes just to think different. Because some of the very things you were bringing to my attention, I didn't agree with you, and I was hell bent on you being wrong and wrote paragraphs to you. But then over time, I saw truth in it, and when we first met face to face, I had to tell you, like, yo, you know, you were right.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, sometimes what we don't understand or agree with doesn't necessarily make it wrong. It could just make it not now in our lives. Like some things right now that all of us think are our truth, we might not feel this way 5 years from now. You know what I mean? As we get older, as we have experiences that change our opinion and our understanding about things. But Phil, I wanted to ask you about social media, because I know you use it creatively and you use it consistently. How has your experience with consuming and creating been different on it lately?
You know, I've seen I haven't been posting as much. So I want to back up, because it's not necessarily even about social media. Like, we recognize what social media is. It's a tool to try to connect people. It has its positive attributes. Like, it can help you connect with people who you might not have seen, but in some cases, there's reason we're not supposed to be connecting with everybody. I think that's real. But it fulfills some type of need. But there are positives to it, right? But I think we got to go back to just the invention of the smartphone itself, right? Because we're spending so much time on our phones, not even necessarily using social media. Because just because you have you might not necessarily have Instagram or Facebook. Like, my mom watches YouTube and Netflix consistently on her phone, right? And she's spending a lot of time on her phone. And what does that do? That impacts potentially her ability to connect with other people. So I think it's first starting out, just our relationships with our phone. I talk about how the reason why Apple put screen time on their phones is because their investors came out and said, yo, these statistics about people using Facebook and what have you, and the higher rates of depression and social isolation, this is not a good look for us and our money, right? So they put that on their phone. So they put that on the phone. And now I'm seeing that Samsung has done that. I just noticed that today on my phone, because we recognize that it tends to there tends to be a lot of social isolation. Just like we forget that it's people behind the phone, right? So you and I could have a disagreement, but I'm just looking at it as MBKCares. I'm not looking at it as Ihsan. And then when you get somebody face to face and you actually have that real connection, it's a different story, right? Because I think social media pushes faux connections, right? They push faux connections for so many people. And so that's when your esteem becomes connected to it. And so if you're somebody who's already positive and you feel great about yourself and how you look, then it's only really going to add to it, right? But if you're somebody who's going into it and you do have some self-esteem issues, you might have a history of depression, anxiety, or what have you, or you're just using it too damn much, then it's going to negatively impact you. And like you said, there is good and not so good that come with this. So for me, I try to use it for to promote my shows and my businesses or what have you. But I'm not immune to it, no matter how much information and awareness that I have of it. I had to use the mute button on some dope brothers who I like busting it up with, people that I'm cool with. I had to use the mute button so I don't see their accounts, because they might post they got a speaking engagement. They might post that they got something thorough going on. And yes, a part of me is happy for them, but a part of me also is, it might be a little jealousy, right? It might be a little questioning of myself. And so I have to be aware of how I'm navigating that and navigating those feelings. I can't see everybody, right? I can't follow everybody just because I know what that can bring up in me, right? Some things that I'm still working on. So it's everything goes back to this idea of self-awareness and knowing self, especially when it comes to navigating social media. Because, you sit, especially Facebook, everybody posting articles, they not reading the articles, they posting videos. And it's just like, yo, damn, like all this negativity. I'm sure y'all looked at it and say, yo, damn, everybody dying from corona? But nah, there's people that's out here that's recovering from corona, but you're not going to see that. And so that goes into the whole psyche and being mindful of what Saul Williams calls your food, right? You got to be mindful of your food. Everything that you're taking in is your food, right? Not just what you're eating, but what you're seeing, which it impacts what you're thinking and how you're going to show up in the world.
Yeah, let me piggyback on that, because that was phenomenal, right? And I think, just lending my personal perspective to it, one of the things what I didn't share at the beginning, and I feel remiss now, but my current position, I'm the director of community engagement and union relations for Councilmember Kendra Brooks. And so I say that because I am required by my job every day. One of my requirements is to follow the news media about this epidemic, right? This pandemic. So I have to watch every I'm watching the mayor's press conference every day. And so I'm hearing directly from the managing director, the mayor, and the head of the health department every day about the number of new cases, the number of people who have died, right? The way it's impacting the city. And so for one, that's one piece about what I'm managing when you talk about our mental health. But the social media piece comes in, where I then go on to social media, and particularly Facebook, and I see posts that completely contradict what the actual authorities have just been sharing. Or I'm seeing information that comes out that is completely detrimental to people's health because it contradicts the actual facts that have been shared. And so for me, social media, again, is a double-edged sword, because there's so many people who have the ability to share so much information that looks valid and that can appear valid, but can really be harmful. And so something that stood out based on what Phil just said, for me, and something that we used to do, really focusing on in the rites of passage programs and in the programming that I've done with young people, is this idea of critical thinking. So again, it doesn't matter what the platform is. What are we what are we doing in terms of our critical thinking process about the information, or the food, as he just referred to, that we're ingesting? And I think that's more important than anything. We're always going to get salacious news. We're always going to get misinformation. But how are we training ourselves and our loved ones to think critically about the information that's coming to us? Because the other side of that critical thinking piece is also, it helps me with my well-being, my mental health, because I know what to turn off and what not to. I know when to tune into things and when not to. And so I think that critical thinking piece is really important when it comes to this idea of social media.
Ihsan, can I jump in real quick?
Yes, sir.
I also wanted to talk about social media from the aspect of social engineering and how narratives and storylines can actually develop and how people can be manipulated. And if you think about it, they had stories about how Russia was able to intervene, right? I've seen people do this on a local level. I've seen petty beefs start off with people just inserting lies and myths, right? And so it's funny how we, as people, we're the micro, we act just like countries act between each other sometimes. And I find that to be very interesting. But the other thing about social media is the dopamine, right? The dopamine that comes from the engagement, especially if you have self-esteem issues and you are socially isolated. Yeah, I mean, that also can play a role in how you relate to people and how you relate to yourself and how you actually walk through life. So what happens is that dopamine loop that comes around and about, you go on social media to feel good, but it really comes from a hormonal position as well. Now, the other piece that social media can be used to organize, there's a lot of positive, just like anything else, it's good and it's bad, there's balance there. But I think to take into account is how social media disrupts somebody's critical thinking through something called groupthink. And it stops people from being creative with their thinking, from challenging and from fact finding. And so what happens is you have somebody saying, this is an orange, this is an orange. And the other person's like, no, it's not, it's an apple. I'm telling you, that's an apple. And they're looking like, no, it's an orange. Everybody else knows this is an orange. And if I'm able to convince somebody through groupthink, through loyalty, through emotionality, that orange now becomes an apple. No matter how much you say it is. An orange, somebody's gonna be like, I got 400 people over here saying it's an apple. Now it's an apple. What? Right? So that's just how powerful storytelling is. And that's why it's very crucial to think about, you perform the stories in your head. So if they run around and they start saying COVID has killed 20,000 people every day, the narrative and how we perform and how we show up probably changes. Right? So when the numbers are lower in Philadelphia and in the state, it's kind of like 70 or something per day. Right? New York is like hundreds a day. Right? And that makes sense because the population is the way it is. But we do have to take into account how social media can be used to turn us against ourselves, to control humanity, to create that something they call the calling, which is kind of getting people in one direction. And so this social media wasn't around like it is now when H1N1 was happening in 2009 with Barack Obama. That was a different type of flu. He didn't make an announcement about it until it hit 1 million people in the world. You see what I'm saying? Social media has been used in a way to galvanize our interests around this too. So that's a whole nother thing about how we're programmed to respond to a crisis.
Yeah. Hey, James, I know you're plugged in, and Greg as well. Y'all both have done a significant amount of work with the young people. Greg had the Philly, was it the Philly Youth Poets, Greg? I forget the name of it. The PYLP or PYPM?
Yeah, it was the Philly Youth Poetry Movement. It's currently like in a transitional state. It's like a board member holding on to it, figuring out what the next steps, what it is. But yeah, one of the biggest things was helping youth activate their voice, amplify their voice in ways that were healthy. And that part of that was started because of my own storytelling ability, my own ability to be a poet or a rapper. And I realized in 2006, like you as a performer, you realize like at some point, you're just doing a lot of artistic complaining. Like some of it's just artistically complaining. Like I can say the same poem. I'm either bringing awareness or I'm venting, and I'm like, y'all gotta do something differently. And so it was my way of activating, not just being about words on stage, but living the word, you know? So.
Yeah, you're living it now. Like you said, like your life has changed, like enjoying the silence and stuff. I think you said something that resonates with me too, man. Like reliving reliving pain, like reciting the same things, complaining over and over again. You actually keep that thing alive sometime. But James, I know you currently still are engaged with the young people through your organization, but also just the nature of the work that you do. Have you been able to connect with the young people still during this pandemic on a regular basis?
On a regular basis and more. I think right now our numbers is even starting to increase, like through like virtual connections, to be honest. And so one of the things we've been doing is like we've been screening. We have 88 questions that we've been surveying like youth, just around like how they feeling, what's going on in their home, how do you feel about like school, gun violence. I even thought about you, Eric, and we have one around just political engagement, just surveying who, like what political people they know in their community, just to kind of survey. And we have them with their friends are now interested in doing a survey. So we're getting a lot of information and feedback during this time. And then we're also surveying teens on access to guns, like being creative with questions like, if you needed a gun, do you know where to get one from? Even if it's not yours. We just like reframing the questions to kind of like get some answers out of them, so we'll know how to reframe and restructure some programming after this. But I think right now we're seeing with our so our program, we're not missing a beat right now. The way we diversified our funding sources, the way we engage with our teams, nothing has stopped or slowed down except for the physical contact. We even shifted to virtual groups. We was meeting like twice a week. Now we just meet virtually twice a week, and it's something that other people just starting to catch on to. But what we're seeing is like some of the youth, and again, when I say youth, I'm talking 13 to 21. They're looking for somebody to ask them how they feel, somebody to validate their feelings, somebody to validate their experience. That, you know, someone to ask them, "Do you need help, Greg?" Get what I'm saying? They just want that, just so that way they can say no. So right now, I think, I know for that population, especially in the Southwest area, it's still like a great need. And, you know, we don't have no cap. So whatever kids or youth or teens feel like they want to be part of a year and have that, that level of engagement, whether it's virtually or, you know, like like whatever stuff we see on social media, if any kids like making shirts or making cupcakes, you know, we spending as much as we can on it. And that's just our way of feeling like during this time while they're so vulnerable and down, you support them. So that way, when we come out of this, you know, they be like, "Oh yeah, he was there from day one." It'd be that day one feeling like, yeah, when I was down and out during COVID, I mean, he asked me how was my day. So it's like just simple things like that. You know, we even shipped, we were trying to get up to 30 kids set up with bank accounts. We can't do that now. So you know what we did? We had them go get green dot debit cards. So when they need some money, we're going to send them money to their debit card. So just being creative as much as possible, but while keeping people engaged. The other thing we've been working on, which is interesting, and again, this is another Eric thing. Something might come your way, but we have like 30 teams researching all their state reps, city council, anybody involved in their community, and we having them write letters to them all around gun violence.
Excellent.
And we already got probably about like 10 in, and we're going to like mail them out or even screenshot them or make a big collage and send them to whatever, you know, political office that, you know, they feel can do a little bit better or has done good enough for them.
Great.
That's incredible. Can you because I'm gonna wrap up with a couple questions for everybody. Phil has to go soon because he got a show coming on at 8. I want everybody to be able to get out their information before I ask these last couple of questions. James, the name of your organization is How can people follow it on social media or a website to get more information?
So when it comes to teens, we take all teens around the city. We do as much engagement as possible. You can do 3 things. You can follow us on Instagram at Philly. Just DM us with whatever you need, whatever you want, even if it's a one-time support thing or long-term. We on Facebook for like the older people at Philly. And then we have a website, www.yeahphilly.org. If for some reason you have, it's like a team or one of those people that was out there playing basketball, if someone has concerns about them being there and they need some game or somebody to kind of pull them under their wing, you can go on our website, yearphilly.org, hit the contact link, and you can put their information in. You ain't even gotta put yours, but theirs in, we'll call them ourselves and we'll meet them wherever they are. Yeah, so just link up with us however you need to, and you'll get a response.
Support what you got going on financially, they can support you through that website.
Yeah, so you can, and again, I know a lot, like this is a struggling time. So for the community, we try not to ask for much from the community. We want the wealthy people, like wealthy suburban, in most cases white people. We want your money, so you can go on our website and you can donate, or you can support us by buying one of our year hoodies.
Okay. This next question I want to gear it towards, I'm gonna do a question for Charles, then Eric, Phil, and then we're gonna finish out with Greg. All right. So Charles, down in your community right now, are people, like, what's the vibe around like the faith community? Are you in an area where the faith community has a lot to say or is doing things to try and help the community?
Well, I'm in an area where the faith community has a lot to say.
It's breaking up.
And I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm okay now.
It's a lot of static.
Hello.
Yeah, just keep going.
Yeah. Technology stuff. Let me. All right. Is that much better?
Yeah, that's a little better.
All right. Having some technical difficulties here, but yeah, no. Down here, man, the faith community always has a lot to say.
It's breaking up. Charles.
Go ahead. Keep going.
There's, I know that there are some pockets here there of organizations of communities that are doing things, you know, setting up food pantries, distribution to elderly disabled people, setting up distribution to the children who are out of school and all that. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on. And even outside the faith community, actually, I have been really impressed with the activity of our art community out here as well.
Good.
The artists have really.
We lost you. Charles, can you hear us?
All right.
I can hear you, yes.
All right. Yeah, you went out for a minute.
Yeah, I think I'm in the best spot here. But yeah, no, I was just saying that while there is some activity with the community, I actually personally have been more impressed with the outreach from our arts community. The artists have really been doing it in a big way.
That's incredible, man. Before we get out, we are gonna have Greg share something too from his own artistic abilities too. I wanted Phil and Eric to let some final thoughts out. Like, what would you say right now to like encourage people during the next 2 weeks when we're supposed to be going through the meat of this pandemic, the way it's been promoted? Like, what would you tell or encourage people to do going forward, Eric?
The first thing I would say is to look for the good, right? Look for the good in the moment. You know, there's so much good that's happening. I think Greg mentioned it earlier. You're not going to hear a lot of stories because so many people are focused on the negative or the potential for negativity and death and, you know, collapsing economy and all of that. But there's a lot of good that's happening too. You know, there's been a couple of news stories about the impact on the environment with the reduced transportation, reduced air flights, reduced cars. There's so much fewer. There's so much fewer people out on the road.
This town is going off, E.
Okay. There's so much fewer people in transit right now that the environment is actually having a chance to recover to a certain extent. There's been news reports about that. So like I said, I was outside the other morning. I mean, we are in the very beginning of spring now, so the weather is nice. But just internally too, you know, my children and I, we haven't gotten a chance to see each other as much, but we've been doing things differently. I've been buying them books online and ordering stuff, and they've been happy to get new books in the mail every week. We've been having a chance to connect in different ways. So I would say, look for the positive in this situation.
Mhm.
And if you can't find any positive, sit still. Sit still. Like Greg and Phil mentioned, be okay with the peace that you can get right now. Right. Stillness is a blessing when you can find it, especially for those that don't normally have it. So I have a group called the Fathering Circle, and we did a Zoom meeting this past Sunday after not being together for a while. And half of the men on the call are at home with their children full time now, and the other half are isolated where they can't see their kids. And so each group was able to share with the other one a perspective on their circumstance. Just being able to appreciate your time with your children, or being able to appreciate the quiet when you do get it, not having a house full of kids running around. So I say just look for the positive where you can, and keep yourself strong, keep your chin up, because this too shall pass.
Absolutely. As I transition to Phil, I want to just say something before you go on, Phil. Something I appreciated that you acknowledged earlier about consuming content, and how I've had to mute some people or block people when I've read their content or seen it. It's not necessarily that it was negative, but it made me feel something where it impacted me in a way that it made me feel like less than, because somebody was doing something greater that I actually aspired to do. And I appreciate you for acknowledging that that's a real thought and a real feeling. And it brought me back to remember. I don't know if any of y'all remember, but it was an artist, or it's still an artist, this dude named T Wise. And T Wise is a friend. He's a brother of mine. But when I was first coming up doing Christian rap, I thought I was pretty good. And I used to go into environments and like almost be like overlooked because we were in the same places. And it created in me envy towards T Wise. And this is somebody that I actually respected and admired, but it created envy in me. And it was a moment for me to grow though. Like once I realized that, like you talked about being self-aware, it changed me in so many ways that were good. Me actually being able to realize like envy is a feeling that I actually have. Because we like to think of ourselves as only being able to have all the good attributes, but not giving ourselves freedom and some space to have the bad attributes in us too, so that God can work things out of us, and so that we can heal in areas on our own, or actually just put parameters around us to stop us from feeling those things on a high level, or responding and reacting out of those. So I appreciate what you said about that earlier, Phil, because that's something that I felt too. And I don't want you to ever think, or anybody who's watching this to think, that any of us is above the feeling of envy, and that actually that envy doesn't necessarily have a good place in us once we acknowledge it, because we're able to speak honestly about it and be honest with ourselves. Phil, you got anything last you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback off what you said, listen, we're not robots, right? So however it is that you feel, it's okay to feel that way. And now once we recognize that we're feeling a certain way, now that's key in understanding, what's happening to us physiologically. How's my body feeling? How does my mind feeling? I always tell people, when I go to speak, I go over symptoms of depression, anxiety, and PTSD and all this. I'm like, forget all that. You could Google that. But if you just don't feel right, because at the end of the day, if you just don't feel right, if you don't feel good, then it's important that you try to find an outlet that can help you. So you might reach out to Department of Behavioral Health. You might reach out to your insurance company. You might Google therapist in my area. You know what I mean? It's just as simple as that. If I don't feel right, it's let the professionals, talk to you and have you understand what's going on. But at a bare minimum, if you feel like, I just don't feel right, then make that necessary move, make that necessary call. But it's okay. As Eric said, talking about being still, that goes to the point that I was going to say, man, just breathe. Right? Just breathe. You got to figure out how to breathe. And you're not going to be able to breathe when you're on your phone. Right? You're not, because you're still consuming. You're not going to be able to do both. Right? So just take this opportunity to breathe. Be mindful of where you get your information from. At this stage of the game, man, like I don't go on anywhere. It's just like, I'm all right. I hear somebody will tell me, masks, or somebody out here from somewhere, unless I see Neil deGrasse Tyson on his podcast, he'll have a doctor on, I'll go to that. Pick that one trusted source, not these fake reporters that might be your homie from high school sharing something and posting a comment about it. But again, just breathe, man. Show yourself some grace. It's gonna be okay, no matter how difficult it seems. And if it's not okay, you know what? We still persevere somehow, right? And at the end of it, whatever's happened, if you have been negatively affected, then we take those necessary steps to work through that, man. And so yeah, that's just my 2 cents. It's gonna be listen, it's gonna be what it is. It's the game. I say that so often. It's the game, man. And I think the more we recognize that some of this shit that takes place it just happens. It's life. The easier it is to sleep at night.
That's the truth.
Phil,
shout out to Neil deGrasse Tyson too.
Yeah.
Phil, I want you to share how can you spell it out too? How people can follow you, and also about your show that's coming on in less than a half hour.
Yeah, so that's so you can follow me on Instagram at Phil_Roundtree. That's PHIL_round as in round, tree as in tree. The show is Rhetorically Speaking. It's on YouTube. It's on Facebook Live. So it's like facebook.com, Quadefy, that's Q as in quail, UAD as in dog, EFY, LLC. The same thing on YouTube. Again, it's a show about what's happening in our world, right? Not only just Black folk, right, but what's happening with white folk. I have various guests on. And so tonight is the Q&A portion. I'm just taking questions. Again, I was sent that video of what was happening down north and all the kids. And so the same information we was talking about in here, we'll talk about on there. Yesterday, I talked about the last 2 days, talked about Young Jeezy and Jeannie Mai and this idea of interracial dating. And I don't know if you saw her comments from 5 years ago where she said Black men were her side piece. And now here she is engaged to one. You know what I'm saying? So that's what we do. Tune in, donate some money. Shout out to Umar Johnson. I play his video every day on there because I need a couple dollars. And I'm giving y'all some brilliant, he said, I'm giving y'all some brilliant information. Don't make me take it away. Now, I try to be a little more tactful with it. You know what I'm saying? So, no, that's love, though. I definitely appreciate y'all brothers, man, for having me on for this hour and a half.
So look, I'm going to share a final thought before Greg finishes the whole program. So for people who are viewing this on Facebook Live and on any other platform, I appreciate you for your time. The goal was to try and be on here no later than 7:30. Our typical meetings we were doing at the library was 6 to 7:30, and this is the platform we chose to do it on, but also bringing what Charles already wanted to do and what other people already wanted to do. I'm just glad that within a matter of hours, we were able to put together this wealth of information, but just this discussion. But I also wanted to share something. We're going to do this every Wednesday, and we can do it in different moderation as well. But I do want to be consistent because this thing is going to be going on. This pandemic or the aftermath of it is going to carry some mental health repercussions regardless. So I want to continue this next Wednesday. We're going to do another one. We're going to call it Wellness Wednesday from 6 o'clock to 7:30 next week. We can have some of the same guests if y'all want to return, or we're going to have different guests as we go forward. I wanted to share my final thought about things to encourage people to do, or to the things that have been helpful for me. If you can go somewhere for a walk, I've been finding an area to walk where there's nobody at, and it's been helpful for me to get some daylight. If you can do some push-ups in the morning, do some push-ups in the morning. You can do push-ups and sit-ups on the side of your bed. Watch some stuff on Netflix that's funny. Reading the Bible has been helpful for me. Journaling has been helpful for me. What else has been helpful? Eating. And I don't know, it's just been a lot of things like that that's been basic, but God has been becoming more real to me through all of this stuff. So I hope everybody out there is able to have more of like a spiritual uplifting as well through this, and also forgiving other people for things that they've done, because ultimately, no matter what they've done, you still here. So it didn't kill you. So I want Greg, do you have a written poem, or you want to freestyle off of a word? Because I got a word if you want to freestyle.
Dag, yo. The options,
pressure.
the options, the options. Good brother. I wrote something while we were talking.
Oh, well, give us that.
And, but what I want to do is,
Yeah,
what's the word though?
it was breathe. Only because Phil
Okay.
was talking about breathe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna fuse this together a little bit.
All right.
So first, I want you to, anybody that's checking this out, I want you to check out my website, www.gregcorbinspeaks, GregCorbinSpeaks.com. Had some speaking engagements that I was supposed to do, got canceled like anybody else right now, but I am working on some webinar series and some other ways because time is very valuable right now. And I want to make sure that I capitalize on this moment and figure out what the next steps are. So that's something I'm working on. And then I also have something I'm working on called the living room experience that I continuously work on. It's more like a men's circle with facilitated discussion and working on some curriculum around that as well. So those are a couple things that I constantly am doing. But I think here's the poem. All right. So this is gonna be fun because some of this is written and some of it's not going to be. What is the story of the respiratory system when it no longer wants to breathe? This moment in time was brought to you by nature. Sitting still has never been so necessary. I've carried the bags of the past only to transform them from trash into treasure. Golden coins of chaos bring order. I'm learning to fall into the silence even deeper. Study self until I know the deepest alleyways of my heart. Build a curriculum inside the classrooms of my mind. Time is a valuable asset and in some sense can make you wealthy. Therapy is a church pew where you get to see you, preach to you, become the sermon that tomorrow needs because this will only be for a season and it will come to pass. I'm watching the air clear, the breath of the planet breathe better. Animals are roaming the cities, returning to their homes once gentrified by technological advancement. Silver linings of families coming together, holding peace, fiercely protecting their ability to connect, loving I love, hearing each other like never before. The songs of birds chirping is the best soundtrack I've ever heard in a time or two. I'm mastering prayer, breathing in air, breathing to breathe and breathe and breathe before they take that away and capitalize and sell that in bottles. This is my time. This is my opportunity. This is the moment where I breathe, become the glory inside your respiratory system. Maybe I can get inside your nerves because the anatomy of my words is the biology of a verb, and that ain't to be cut up like herb, but I'll give it to you anyway. So I want you to breathe, inhale, exhale, breathe, inhale, exhale, breathe until you find the heaven inside of you, because now is the time for you to study you.
Thank you, bro.
And you can follow me at Greg Corbin Speaks on Instagram as well. And I'm going to make sure I reach out to I think Charles and James. I got to reach out to y'all and friend y'all on Facebook. So I appreciate this time. And I'm glad we were able to make it valuable. If anybody's interested in any wellness activities, check out what my wife is doing. She also has a radio show on Word 900 AM, and she's on there every morning, 6 to 7 o'clock. So I want to make sure I connect all you with her because I think all you will be valuable guests on her show. You have something to offer. And if you want, follow her Instagram, which is Hello Helena, HELLO HELENAH. She's a ANH. She's behind me right now. So, but yeah, HELLO HELANAH. That's my wife's name. Hello Helena on Instagram. She's a wellness consultant, yoga instructor, licensed masseuse, and I really mean everything I just said. More so, study yourself, build that classroom that is you, and be ready to teach when we get past this. And even in this moment, feel what you feel, learn what you learn, and breathe and breathe and breathe, because quiet is the best sound I've ever heard.
Perfect.
Beautiful.
I appreciate y'all. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Greg, Charles, and James. So I'm going to do this again next week. And if y'all want to be on here with us again, I would love y'all to be here again. Greg, I'm going to talk to you. I actually want to create a platform where we moderate and let some females discuss things too. So if your wife will want to be on that, or if the two of y'all want to be on something, I think it'd be dope to be able to talk about even how relationships are navigating through this. So
Whew.
I appreciate y'all. All
Yeah.
right. And y'all have a peaceful night. And thank you to everybody out there who might have listened to this live and people who are going to hear this in the future. If you're hearing it in the future, that means you made it. All right.
Word. Blessings, y'all.
Right.
Peace. Be
Yeah.
safe.
Peace, everybody.
Peace, bro.